This is part 2 of your photosynthesis notes, and let's first start with talking about the parts of a chloroplast. A chloroplast is a membrane-bound organelle found in plant cells and some protists, and it's made up of a few parts. The thylakoid discs are these round discs inside of the chloroplast. In your diagram, there's stacks of 3 there. There's grana, so one thylakoid disc stack is called a grana. Plural is granum. The stroma is all of this fluid stuff that's around inside of it. It's kind of like the cytoplasm in a cell. And then there is the outer membrane, which is a double-layered membrane there. It also has, which I don't have you label, but it also has its own DNA and its own ribosomes. So it's kind of like a little cell inside the big cell, and that's what the endosymbiotic theory pretty much states. So let's go on and talk about the basic steps of photosynthesis. There's the light-dependent reaction and the Calvin cycle are the 2 main steps. So I've got another little image here for you. The light-dependent reaction will come first. In the light-dependent reaction, basically what's happening is water's coming in. You've got a little electron transport chain, and the main purpose of electron transport chains is making energy. So water will come in, it will get split apart, oxygen will be given off, and then hydrogens and electrons off of the water will be changed into this ATP and NADPH that will be used in the next part of the reaction to build macromolecules such as sugars. So I'm going to zoom in a little bit on my light-dependent reaction, my electron transport chain, while I talk about it. So letter A. It occurs in the thylakoid membranes of the chloroplast. So all those little discs are membranes, and I'm zoomed in on one of them. The inside of the thylakoid membrane is the lower part. The outside, the stroma, is the outer part. And letter B, it involves chlorophyll, which are pigments that capture light energy. And it's got 2 sets of little proteins in the membrane. They're called photosystem 1 and photosystem 2 that are full of this chlorophyll, and they're green on your diagram here. And again, the purpose of this reaction is to convert light energy into chemical energy, and it is going to be stored in ATP and NADPH, and it does this through an electron transport chain. So water is going to come in, it's going to break apart, and when it breaks apart, H+ ions or hydrogen ions are pumped through ATP synthase from the inside of the thylakoid discs and out through this ATP synthase into the stroma. And every time a hydrogen gets pumped through, we make more ATP. Also, something else that's happening is that electron is traveling through and it is attaching a hydrogen to NADP, making NADPH. And NADPH is a lesser powerful, I think is the word I'm looking for, energy carrier, whereas ATP is a much more potent energy carrier, but they both are energy carriers. So in the electron transport chain, here is where oxygen, or O2, is given off during the decomposition of water. And actually what happens is 2 waters have to come in order for this reaction to work, and 4 hydrogen ions are produced, 4 electrons are produced. Remember, a hydrogen is just a proton and an electron. So you have 4 protons produced, 4 electrons produced, and then the leftover oxygens will bond to themselves, and those will leave the cell as waste. So that's your light-dependent reaction. The Calvin cycle is also called the light-independent reaction or the dark reactions, but it doesn't always happen during the dark. A lot of times it happens during the light, so it can occur in both light and dark. It occurs in the stroma of the chloroplast. So it occurs in the area of the chloroplast that, that's interesting. I have the wrong thing here. So it occurs in the area of the chloroplast that's kind of like the cytoplasm of the cell. And what happens is energy from the light reactions, that ATP and the NADPH, are used to produce organic compounds such as sugars. No, I don't have the wrong thing. So what happens is carbon dioxide is going to come in and it comes in through the stomata of the leaf, which if you put your hands together and then pull them apart and make a little hole, that's kind of what your stomata look like. They are little openings in the under parts of the leaf, and we'll talk about those in lab. And so the carbon dioxide diffuses from the air through the stomata of the leaf, or the holes of the leaf. I think I skipped what's above. I started talking. So number 2, it should be energy from light reactions. ATP and NADPH are used to produce organic compounds. So I said it, but I didn't say it so specifically. So carbon dioxide is going to come in. That energy is going to come into place, and carbon atoms from the carbon dioxide are going to be bonded, or they're going to be fixed into organic compounds such as or carbohydrates. So how that works is, see this big blue word Rubisco? So carbon dioxide, which is a 1 carbon molecule, is going to bond to Rubisco, which is a 5 carbon molecule, and it will make a 6 carbon molecule, and immediately what happens is it will split into 2 3 carbon molecules, and then through a whole bunch of reactions, and you can just see a couple of them here. Every arrow represents a different reaction. If you take biochem, you'll have to learn all of them. But so you have carbon fixation, you have reduction, and then you have regeneration of ribulose. So it's a cycle because you regenerate what you start with. But through this whole big process, what's going on is ATP and NADPH are donating energy to create the anabolic reactions in many, many, many steps. And then the raw materials of ATP and ADP and NADPH or NADP, they are recycled. They go back to the light reactions. After ATP donates its phosphate, it goes back to light to get another phosphate group, and NADPH goes back to get its other hydrogen. So everything's getting recycled in this process while we're making these carbohydrates. And then finally, number 6, carbohydrates are then consumed or eaten by autotrophs and heterotrophs, which are your animals. So they're eaten by the autotrophs that make them, and then heterotrophs come in and they eat the autotrophs, so they are also given energy. So that's part 2, and I will give you part 3 of your notes here in just a second.